The great John Carney is here. He's the Breitbart economics editor. John, good morning. We did not prepare you for this. I did not tell you that this is what we were talking about. But for the last 2 days, we've talked about this banning of TikTok. And it's been fascinating because it's been quite a split here on the Breitbart News Daily audience. So where do you land on this bill that would force divestment from communist China, but if it doesn't, would just ban it?
Yeah, I think that we probably have to burn TikTok to the ground. I'm very worried that even divestment will not work because essentially you have to destroy all of the back-end coding that makes the application work. It can't be trusted. It has definitely been programmed so that the Chinese communists will always have access to the data, will always be able to weaponize the algorithm. I'm sure it was built that way to begin with. Right now, we're giving them plenty of notice to build that in now. So I can't imagine a world in which just because we physically move the storage of where the code lives and where, all of the videos live to someplace out of China. First of all, there's a lot of talk that we can move it out of China, but keep it out of the United States. So, let's say you move it to another country. How do we police the idea of whether or not China has a physical back end into wherever it is somewhere else? But I don't think you can actually prevent them from corrupting the software without having to build the thing from scratch.
Would China want to sell it, or would they sell it? And then the other question is, would someone want to buy it? What American would want it?
Yeah, look, a lot of Americans probably would want it. There is this problem, though, of a price differential. What I would want if I were China and trying to sell it is probably a lot more money than American companies would be willing to pay. I mean, we don't know the value of this because it's not a publicly traded thing. But it would, but it is. If you look at the value of things like Facebook and Snapchat, it is a potentially extremely valuable. Elon Musk bought Twitter for a lot of money. So what this could be would be very, very expensive. I'm not sure China wants to sell it. Although, again, I'm not sure what the value of it is once it's banned from the U.S. So, maybe they'll sell it. But again, I think the divestment thing misses a bigger point, which is the potential to weaponize this thing will not be cured just because the nominal owners are no longer, thralls to the Chinese communist regime.
That's right.
We're going to need something deeper than that.
Yeah. All right. Last question on this, and this broadens out because how do you work through your libertarian instincts when on something like this where you hear the word big government ban? Because we've had a lot of callers, people very concerned about this. Like I said, it's been pretty split, if not leaning towards not banning it. So how do you work through that idea of I don't want the government telling me what I can and cannot?
There's three factors. One, this is being run by a foreign adversary of the U.S. Libertarians, very few libertarians objected to the U.S. doing things like not trading with Hitler or not trading with Stalin. And that's exactly how we have to look at China right now. Number two, this thing, we actually know it can harm children. And most libertarians who I know say, yes, adults should have the right to make choices for themselves, but we have to make sure that children aren't harmed. And really, we saw that TikTok can actually be used to create sociogenic illness in children. Remember, there was a period during the lockdowns where people were getting something that seemed like Tourette's syndrome, children, girls in particular, from watching TikTok videos of people who had something that seemed like Tourette's syndrome. That was, in my mind, a test case where they literally, I do not believe that was an accident. I think it was being done on purpose. The algorithm was showing this to people to see whether or not you could create mental illness in people through the algorithm, and we could. So that's a big problem. And then finally, the third problem is I don't think we're really inhibiting people's ability to express themselves in any serious way. There are plenty of outlets in which you can put your videos up. If somebody were to sell you a newspaper or a magazine that was made of toxic ink that poisoned you when you touched it, we wouldn't say, oh, well, no, that's just free expression. Let them do that. No, we'd say, okay, you can print that. You just can't print it on that paper with that poison ink. And that's what's happening.
I like that a lot. All right, I like that a lot. Really good. Okay, we got about 3 minutes. Sorry to do this, but what is the latest with the inflation numbers?
So inflation has now been rising for 4 months in a row. It was rising it fell for a year and a half and came down from, the very high numbers we were seeing in 2022 to the still high numbers in 2023. But around 8 months ago, it stopped falling. Around 4 months ago, it started creeping up. The last 2 months, it has been, but it was creeping up from, a place that wasn't so bad. The last 2 months, it's actually been bad. We had if you annualized the kind of inflation we had in February, in other words, if it ran that hot for the next 12 months, we would have 5.4% inflation. That's a lot. And if you look deeper into the numbers, you see that we have a lot of inflation in the services sector, which is particularly problematic because where you can gin up the factory to produce some more goods, it's harder to produce more services when you're already more or less at full employment. So that inflation is stickier. We're going to be stuck there. What these numbers are telling us is that disinflation, the lowering of the pace of inflation is no longer happening. And I think that what that means is that the Federal Reserve will not have they really want to cut interest rates, but they will not have the opportunity to cut interest rates this year because inflation is going to remain too high and actually looks to be climbing now.
And if they did it anyway, that would look really bad for election interference.
It would. And I think that they're actually cognizant of it. They always say they don't pay attention to politics. But I think if they cut while inflation is rising, and it gets worse the closer we get to the election, I think they know that will create a huge backlash. And I think Congress would, potentially act. You'll have a problem because you have Democrats in the Senate, and if Joe Biden was reelected, that would be a problem. But if we get a Republican Senate and a Republican White House, then I think they would, and the Fed had stepped in a way that looked very political. I think we could see laws passed that wouldn't do anything, extreme like abolish the Fed, but would restrain them. We did that in the 1970s. People were not happy with the way the Fed was running itself. And Congress passed laws that said, you have literally when we say that the Fed has a dual mandate to maximize employment and stabilize prices, that comes from Congress. Congress is allowed to set the rules, the operating rules for the Fed. And I think those might change if the Fed starts acting politically.
All right. John Carney, Breitbart economics editor. Sign up for the Breitbart Business Digest, the daily newsletter. John, appreciate you, sir.
Thanks for having me.